What does the typical doctor do when diagnosed with an incurable illness? Well, usually they resign themselves to the fate of a conventional treatment by another doctor. But our guest today is a former plastic surgeon who went a different path and underwent an extreme lifestyle overhaul to fight and beat cancer. This is the story of beating cancer naturally with Dr. Dominic Brandy. Dr. Brandy, great to have you on.
Hey, it's great being here, CASPAR.
Listen, you were diagnosed, what was it, 5 years ago with incurable blood cancer. What was the first thing that went through your mind when you were given that diagnosis as a doctor yourself, a plastic surgeon, but as someone who has helped patients and now you found yourself in the seat of a patient with an incurable cancer?
Well, you really can't describe what it's like when you're told that you have cancer. We can all kind of go through a scenario in our head and we think we can handle it, but I think the biggest thing is we all know we're going to die, but when it's right in front of you, you really do an evaluation of your spirituality, your friendships, your marriage, everything. So it was a shock. I must say, I think I told you before, I had a very prosperous plastic surgery, med spa, anti-aging center. And I did a lot of the things that I would tell my patients to do. And I thought I was extremely healthy. So when I came down with this diagnosis, it was definitely a huge shock.
Now, what did you do then after the shock? Were you originally on path to go with a conventional treatment plan?
Well, my story actually started about 2 months before I was diagnosed. My wife and I were on a 2-week Viking cruise, and I've read well over 300 books on health and nutrition in my career. And anytime I'm on a vacation, the first thing I do is I look for a health and nutrition book. So we're on this 2-week cruise. I go into Kindle. There's a book called How Not to Die by Michael Greger. I don't know if you've ever read it. I would recommend your audience to read it. It's an incredible book that really totally changed my life. If you get the hardback, it's about 2 inches thick, and 1 inch of it are scientific references. I never counted how many scientific references, but there have to be, over 3,000 scientific references in there. And as I was reading the book, the science was just showing over and over again that cultures and research cohorts that ate more plant-based had much lower incidence of cancer, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, dementia, really all-cause mortality. So on this cruise, I decided I was going to eat whole food, plant-based. I told my wife, she thought I was out of my mind because, we had all this meat and eggs and dairy and everything on this cruise. But I'm one of these people, when I decide to do something, I just do it. So before I got diagnosed, I had already been eating whole food, plant-based. And that's really one of the reasons why when I got diagnosed, the type that I have is called an IgA myeloma, which is the most aggressive of the three. For your audience, myeloma is a cancer of the plasma cells. They're the cells that make your antibodies. And there's IgG, IgA, IgM. IgG is kind of in the middle. IgM is the least aggressive. IgA is the most aggressive, which is the type that I have. And my oncologist wanted me to do this triple regimen, 2 oral medications, and then a shot that I would have to get into my abdomen every week called Velcade. And when I started reading about Velcade, almost everybody that gets it gets a pretty bad peripheral neuropathy. And being a surgeon, that concerned me. I don't want my fingers to be, jeopardized. So my oncologist pulled me into a side room and tried to get this other patient who had gone through Velcade to talk me into it. In fact, that guy's a good friend of mine. We always go out to lunch. Ever since then, we kind of befriended each other. But I went back to my oncologist into the other room and I told him, listen, I'm not doing the Velcade. And I said it for a couple of reasons. First off, I didn't want the peripheral neuropathy. But secondly, I had already been eating a whole food, plant-based diet, and I was confident that that was really going to help me. So every month on these 2 oral medications, I was just getting better and better. My oncologist never thought I was going to be able to get into a remission without this shot. By 6 months, I was in a complete remission, and I've stayed that way for 5 years now with a much lower dose of these 2 oral medications. So I still am on medication. One thing that when I counsel, I do a lot of lifestyle cancer coaching for patients, and I do not recommend that they get off of their conventional therapy. I really believe in an integrative approach. I mean, you really got to do a little bit of conventional. You have to do natural. You have to do psychological. You really have to approach it holistically. So I really encourage them. In fact, I have a lady right now that I'm coaching. She has ovarian cancer, and she went through all kind of alternative treatments and didn't do the conventional. Now she's got it in her liver and her lungs, and now I'm trying to push her to different types of modalities besides what I do, like hyperthermia treatment and ozone treatment and so forth. But I do still take a small dose of the conventional medication. But I've been able to live extremely healthy life. Like my cardiovascular system's great, my blood pressures are great. But what happened with me when I first got diagnosed, I went into a deep dive into the scientific literature because I wanted to find out everything that I could do naturally to increase my chances of getting into a remission and then staying there. So after about a year, I was gaining all this knowledge, and I decided to do a course, kind of a lecture at one of the local hotels. So I've given a lot of interviews through a lot of the local TV stations on plastic surgery procedures, anti-aging, med spa. And there's one anchor that I kind of knew, and I called her. I said, "Hey, Michelle, can you do a little story? I'm going to be doing this lecture and put on TV about what I'm doing, all the natural things and so forth." So she did it. We thought we were going to get about 50 people there. And, we're kind of waiting. We have 50 chairs out there. All of a sudden, there's like 125 people in this room, and we're pulling chairs from all the other, from the restaurant and everything else. It was kind of interesting. So I gave this lecture. I had it planned to go for about an hour, but it ended up, I don't know how I stretched this thing out to 2 hours. People were asking me a lot of questions in the middle of the lecture. And when I was done, I had a standing ovation. And I've never had a standing ovation in my life. I don't know if it was because they felt sorry for me because I had cancer, or they really thought the lecture was good. I personally think the reason was there were a lot of cancer patients out there. And I think a lot of them just thought they were resigned to the chemo, to the surgery, the radiation, and there wasn't anything they could do on their own. And I remember one lady specifically, and there were a few others that came up to me after the lecture, and she had myeloma like I did. And she said that afterward, and she was definitely obese, she asked her doctor, "Hey, should I change my diet?" And he said, "Oh, no, just keep eating the way you eat. You'll do just fine." And she told me, she goes, "I just knew that wasn't right. That just didn't ring well with me." And I had other patients, the same thing. The doctors just said, "Hey, keep doing what you're doing. Just take the chemo and you'll be fine." So what I did then, I started a website called naturalinsightsintocancer.com. I started an Instagram site. It's called Cancer Veggie Doc. And then I would have seminars every month in my med spa, and I would invite different speakers. They would mainly talk about plant-based eating. I did that for quite a while until COVID hit. But while I was doing that, people kept asking me, "Hey, you know so much, you should write a book." So it was Memorial Day, 2019. Every morning I woke up, I wrote for about an hour. I did research in between. I had the book done by Labor Day, and I had it on Amazon first week of November. And then I had a book launching the second week of November. So that's kind of how the whole thing got started. And now I do, through my website, I do everything virtually. I do 1 or 2 hour consultations. I have a lot of different lab testing through Quest Labs, through Doctors Data, Great Plains Laboratories. And all those are done with Quest. There's Quest everywhere. Those are done through blood, but through Doctors Data, we do microbiome testing. And Great Plains, it's either a dried spot, urine, or hair analysis. So everything I do is virtually. And then I do 24/7 coaching. I give them a food journal with exercise place in there. And I I do charge for it. It's like $20 a month. I used to not charge for it, but patients always felt like they were bothering me. So I started this thing 24/7 text, email availability. I mean, you can text me 2 a.m. if you want. But that's been great. I get text messages every day. I just had a woman yesterday. She sent me her lab work. She was scared about something about it. And that's worked out really well. Just to really keep in contact with them. They fill out their food journal every week. I see what they're intaking, how much they're exercising. And I think that's really important to have that access to the doctor. So it's been rewarding. I mean, I've helped hundreds of people with cancer, and it's actually been one of the most rewarding parts of my career. I had a great plastic surgery med spa anti-aging center, but this has been a lot more rewarding to me.
I could tell you why they gave you a standing ovation. It's because so many patients that deal with chronic incurable diseases, they are just seeking someone to give them hope, someone to empower them, saying, you can get through this. And when they hear that, it's just, it's a shining light to them. So I understand if you had people listening with cancer and we're told there's nothing you could do, like that woman who came to you, that diet doesn't matter. I mean, ridiculous claim.
What most people don't realize, and I'm sure you've heard this before, but in medical school, I mean, we basically get I would say it's about 12 hours of nutrition, and it's almost like a junior high school health class. I mean, right. It's like, okay, if you don't get enough vitamin C, you're going to get scurvy. If you don't get B1, you're going to get beriberi or D, rickets. I mean, it's almost absurd, to be quite frank with you. And one statistic I just read, most cardiologists die of what? Cardiovascular event. I mean, yeah. It's crazy how physicians really don't understand nutrition. It's really extremely sad.
It's very sad. But you have people such as yourself and so many others now shining a light onto things. And of course, you wrote a book, Beat Back Cancer Naturally. It had 5 precepts in it. Can you go through those?
Yeah, the precepts. And actually, I'm going to be doing a second edition because there's a lot more precepts I need to add in there. But in the book, the basic precepts were a whole food, plant-based diet. And as far as a whole food plant-based diet, I don't have a problem with people eating meat. If you look at the blue zones, they are the 5 areas of the world where people live the longest. Icaria, Greece, Sardinia, Okinawa, Nicoya, Costa Rica, and Loma Linda, which is in the United States. It's where a lot of the Seventh-day Adventists live. But if you look at those areas, they eat about 95% plant-based. They do eat meat maybe once or twice a week. It's about the size of a deck of cards. So I do think you can eat, for instance, like a plant predominant keto or a plant predominant paleo. So I don't like to get into all these, these arguments, vegan versus carnivore and so forth, because it starts to get ridiculous. In fact, where I've been kind of focusing is fiber. Like, let's get rid of the word meat and let's get rid of the word plant. Let's just talk about fiber, because that's really where the goal should be, is trying to get at least 30 grams of fiber per day. So a whole food plant-based diet is the first one, and targeted supplements. So through my research, I found several herbs that had really pretty extremely potent anti-cancer activity. So I mean, I personally take over 30 supplements. I just took them right before we did this interview. There's supplements that I've researched, heavily, anywhere from astragalus to ashwagandha to amla, to noni fruit, mangosteen. I mean, ones people never even heard of before, neem, moringa. So what I do when I do my consultations, I write them a letter the next day. I put all the supplements that I think they should be taking. I put 3 asterisks to the ones that I think are the most important, 2 asterisks next to the ones I think are least important, and 1 on the, the very low bottom of importance. And they can get them all on Amazon. I do not hawk any supplements. I research all my supplements. In fact, it's a good place for your audience to go if they are interested in learning supplement is high quality. It's called consumerlab.com.
Mhm.
I don't know if you've ever used that before, but if you go on there, you learn some amazing things. Like, for instance, the soy milk that I use the SZULC brand now. That was their top pick. And when I look at other brands, they have less fiber and they also have less protein. The soy, 1 cup of SZULC has 8 grams of protein, and it has 2 grams of fiber. So in the morning, I do this special drink with all of these. And this is one of the supplements that I recommend everybody to do. I'm really big on freeze-dried powders. I put about 12 different freeze-dried powders in my morning coffee. I have a 24/7 ounce coffee cup. It's made by Aloe. I use a light roast organic coffee that I get. It's a Keurig type. And I put strawberry, raspberry, blackberry, blueberry, grape, goji berry, acai berry. Cacao is the main flavor, so I put a good tablespoon of that in there. Then there's a protein powder that I use. There's a 10 mushroom powder that I put in there. But the reason I'm big on these freeze-dried powders is that most people don't realize this. Plant foods have over 100,000 phytonutrients. And I just heard a podcast by Jed Fahey. He's one of the premier experts on phytonutrients. I mean, he actually thinks there's over 5 million phytonutrients in the edible plants. There's probably over 5 million phytonutrients. So when you intake 1 gram of freeze-dried blueberry powder, it's like eating 50 grams of blueberries. And these phytonutrients, they have amazing anti-cancer activity. In fact, in the end of the chapter on whole food plant-based, I get into all the different things that phytonutrients do. I mean, they can fragment the DNA. They really disrupt cell signaling between the cancer cells. They disrupt the cancer cell division at various phases. They enhance the tumor suppressor genes. They basically inhibit angiogenesis, the ability of the cancer to develop more blood cells. So when I do these freeze-dried powders, I mean, I am getting like an incredible phytonutrient punch along with the coffee, because coffee has a ton of polyphenols and phytonutrients. And I do that as part of I do intermittent fasting. I eat my last meal's about 8, and I don't really eat until noon. But I do that drink. I wake up about 5:30. I do that drink as soon as I wake up. So I consider that still as part of my fast. But I add a cup of soy milk to that. I put it in the microwave for about a minute and a half. And then I stir it. It is a little bit thick, so you do have to stir it as you're sipping it, but it tastes incredibly awesome. And I do all my computer work. I go into the PubMed. I'm reviewing all kind of articles, and writing blogs and making videos and so forth. And then when I'm about halfway filled, I fill up again with another cup of soy, and then I put that in the microwave. And I calculated the other day, just by doing that, I have intaked 27 grams of protein and 12 grams of fiber, just with that. And I'm getting all of these phytonutrients, and I'm doing it in a kind of a fasted state. I don't know if you've ever interviewed Walter Longo, but Walter's done some amazing work with cancer patients. He started with rodents, and he found if you fasted them 24 hours before they got their chemo treatment, and really it's more like a calorie restrict, 5 to 1,000 calories, and then the day of the chemo, 500 to 1,000 calories, and then the day after the chemo, 500,000 calories. In rodents, they found that the cancer was annihilated better, and also that the rodents had less side effects. And then when he started to do clinical trials with humans, he's finding the same thing. So normally when I'm counseling my patients, like this one ovarian cancer patient that I'm just talking to, instead of getting like a big dose every month, there's something called metronomic chemo, where you give, let's say you were going to give, 100 milligrams. Well, you give 25 milligrams each week. And what they find is you have much less side effects, and you don't give the angiogenesis a chance to redevelop in that 1 month period. So, so a lot of times I'll tell them, hey, listen, go to your oncologist and see if he'll do your chemo metronomically, rather than giving you like a big dose. That's what I told this woman. So, so there's ways that you can, do all of these different supplements that I recommend. I know you probably have heard this, and I think it's a knee-jerk reaction. A lot of oncologists, they tell their cancer patients, don't take any supplements while you're getting the chemo. And I always, there's a section in my book, I go over a couple really good studies. One was by Dr. Keith Block. He looked at 965 different studies. It was a meta-analysis, and he wanted to see, these were people that were taking antioxidants during their chemo treatments. And he found that people actually did much better. They were able to finish their chemo treatments. They had less side effects. I mean, there was only one that had a side effect, and it was vitamin A overload. That's a fat soluble vitamin. They just overloaded on it. And then there was another one. It was a meta-analysis of 280 studies that showed the same thing. And one thing, I've actually gotten arguments on the internet. There's this one guy, David Chan, on Quora Digest, smart guy, but he really doesn't know anything about nutrition. And 20 years ago, there was a very potent IV antioxidant called amifostine. And it was made for people to get radiation so that it doesn't damage all the peripheral cells. And it was also for certain types of chemo, so it doesn't cause peripheral damage. And what they found was when they did this, it had absolutely no negative effect on the end result. So I always bring it up to these guys. I say, okay, you're going to give like this potent IV antioxidant, and then you're telling people they can't take some vitamin C or turmeric or, noni fruit or, ginger or garlic. It's kind of, it's actually absurd. So I always tell my patients, I'm not telling you to override the oncologist, but I think you're going to be better off doing supplements. So supplements are number 2, exercise is number 3. And I think that's probably one of the most important things. Stress and sleep are number 4 and 5. But I always tell people, if you're exercising, your stress is going to be less. And if you're exercising, your sleep's going to be better. So, exercise is incredibly important. In fact, I always go over this one study. I have it in my book, and it's almost unbelievable. It's patients that, first off, if you exercise regularly, your chances of getting most cancers, it decreases anywhere from 10 to 35%, depending on the type of cancer. But if you get breast cancer, especially, this one study looked at women that had breast cancer, and if they just briskly walked for 30 minutes a day, they lowered their risk of getting a relapse by 24%. If they ran 2/3 of a mile per day, they lowered their risk of a relapse by 40%. And if they ran 2.3 miles per day, they lowered it by 95%. It's almost unbelievable, but exercise has this incredible effect on your immune system. It upgrades your tumor suppression genes. It makes your innate antioxidants work more efficiently. It makes you more insulin sensitive. And that's the other thing that most people don't realize, is that when you are not metabolically fit, if you have even pre-diabetes, which 38% of the population has, your body is not going to be able to get the sugar into the muscle or the liver cell, because basically it's saturated, it's fatty acid accumulation that occurs in the muscle cell, and it really mucks up the GLUT4 receptors. So the sugar really, can't get in well. So the insulin levels really jack up. But what people don't realize, insulin is one of the most anabolic growth promoters in the body. In fact, when they do rodent studies or petri dish studies, and they want to get the cancer cells to grow faster, you know what they put on them? They put insulin on it. So really, making sure that you're not pre-diabetic and you're metabolically fit, and probably one of the best ways to do that is through exercise, and especially resistance exercise. You really have to make sure that you maintain your muscle mass. So I put together a little video where I do I go through these different resistance exercises, and And in my book, I have a really interesting study that showed that just doing 6 minutes of exercise jacks up your natural killer cell activity by 50%. So a lot of times patients will go, I don't have time to exercise. I say, you know what? Just do 6 minutes every morning, because it's definitely going to give you some benefit. It's really the consistency more than anything. And then, I talked about stress reduction. I do think that's extremely important. There's a lot of different, I'm sure you guys have a lot of different, stress reduction techniques, but I have a whole list of different things that they can do. One of the things that I did, I thought was really important. It was recommended to me by a friend that had myeloma, is to go to a psychologist. And I did do that. I had 3 visits with a psychologist that specialized in cancer patients. And that really did help me a lot because, you're dealing with this whole thing with death. You don't think about it every day, but, you're thinking about, hey, what am I going to go through? What's it going to be like? Am I going to be in pain? What if I do get pain? Are they going to be able to keep it under control? One thing she told me that really kind of allayed me, she said that in the last 3 months, when patients know they're going to die, she said they're at peace with it. That made me feel good. And now she said there's 5% that go down kicking. They're going to Mexico and everywhere else. But she said 95% are pretty much, they're at peace. They've made peace with it. They know they're going to die and they just, it's, and that really did make me feel good. So I do think that's really important to see if you could seek out a psychologist that does have experience with, with cancer patients. And sleep is so important. I mean, you really need to try to get at least 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night. And that's really when all of your DNA repair is going on, a lot of the detoxing of your body's going on, autophagy. It's just, when you go through some of the studies, for instance, night shift workers, there's a lot of studies that show that, they have much higher cancer rates compared to the average population. In fact, there's one study with prostate cancer, people that did work night shift, it actually took them 20 years if they started to get on a regular study, to get back to like a baseline. So night shift work and not getting good sleep really enhances your chances of getting cancer. In fact, one study that I read, they took people that had 5 hours or less of sleep and they followed them for 25 years. And they found that people that had 5 hours or less had a 25% incidence of premature death. So it definitely isn't a good thing. And one thing that is important, we were talking about the DNA repair going on at sleep. What most people don't realize, and I learned this early on when I had myeloma, there's a very famous myeloma researcher. His name's Mikhail Munchki, and he wrote an article in Nature. And what he said in that article is by the time you get diagnosed with myeloma, the cancer that I have, you have about 5,000 DNA mutations in that cancer cell. And by the time you relapse, you're at about 12,000 DNA mutations. So that's one of the reasons why I promote a whole food plant-based diet. Plants have 63 times the antioxidant power compared to animal products. So these antioxidants are going to neutralize a lot of these free radicals that are actually being generated by these chemotherapeutic drugs. So I think that's one of the reasons why these free radicals really, kind of get out of hand. I do think that doing good herbal, I do everything pretty much through herbal supplements. I think that the antioxidant power in there can, neutralize some of that DNA mutation. And also, getting that sleep at night is going to help repair some of the DNA mutation that's occurring overnight. The things that I've added, when I write a second edition, is intermittent fasting. I do think that's important. And in fact, I do have one study under exercise because fasting and exercise have a lot of similarities. But there was one study where they looked at breast cancer patients and 13 hours was kind of the cutoff. If they fasted 13 hours or more every night versus 13 hours or less, the people that fasted over 13 hours actually had a 36% reduction in their breast cancer rates, relapse rates. So I do think when you do intermittent fast, I do a 16-hour fast, I eat in an 8-hour window. I think you're giving your body much more time to focus on repair. Getting rid of a lot of the misfolded proteins, repairing DNA, doing detox. All that is important. As you know, we're exposed to so many toxins in this world. So when you give your body about 16 hours to kind of focus on, getting rid of a lot of the toxins and being able to do a lot of DNA repair, I just think you just have to make it a point. Even if you wake up at like this morning, I woke up at 6 hours. I just stayed in bed. Because I eventually went back to sleep. And I think sometimes people wake up and they go, okay, I'm done. And I think sometimes if you just stay in bed and just kind of train your body, hey, I got to get 7 to 8 hours of sleep because it's really important to me. The last thing, in fact, I'm thinking about writing a book just on this, is the microbiome. I really think that's where the money is. The more I read about the microbiome, I am just like totally blown away. I mean, we have about 37 trillion bacteria in our gut, and we have about 37 trillion cells in our body. And you basically have your good Prevotella bacteria. There's about 500 subspecies under that. And you have your Bacteroides, there's about 500 subspecies under that. And what we do know is that these good bacteria thrive on fiber. When you eat plants, your digestive enzymes cannot metabolize that. In fact, what's really interesting, we only have 17 digestive enzymes to handle what we eat. In our gut, there's over 60,000 different enzymes down there to handle a multitude of different foods. So the fiber gets down there, these good bacteria, these Prevotella bacteria, they metabolize the fiber. They create these short-chain fatty acids, butyrate, acetate, propionate. And these are the most anti-inflammatory molecules I ever seen in my life. I mean, these things are incredible. You can't take it with a supplement because it gets destroyed. I know the pharmaceutical industry is probably going, man, if we could make a supplement like this, this would be a major killer. But these short-chain fatty acids are extremely anti-inflammatory, and these gut bacteria control 70% of your immune function. That's the part that really blows my mind. And they really do it through signaling through this single layer. You have a single layer of cells in your gut. And the blood vessels with all of the different B cells, T cells, T regulatory cells, and so forth, they're flowing near the intestine. And these gut bacteria are basically sending signals to these immune cells and telling them where to go, how to fight, telling the regulatory T cells when the inflammation needs to kind of tone down. Hey, regulatory T cells, get in there and like tone down this inflammation. And I think that's one of the reasons people get these autoimmune diseases. I think when they have dysbiosis, their gut bacteria really aren't in a position to really kind of guide like the immune response. But another thing that really kind of blew my mind about these gut bacteria is they secrete. Where do you think most of your serotonin comes from? You probably think it comes from your brain, right? Because doctors give serotonin uptake inhibitors for people that have depression. It's like the happy hormone. 90% of your serotonin actually comes from your gut bacteria and 50% of your dopamine. So, and then there's 30 other plus neurotransmitters that are released by these gut bacteria. And the other thing that's interesting, I don't know if you've ever seen any of these studies where they've done fecal transplants between identical twins. One's obese, one's thin. They take the feces of the obese twin, they do a fecal transplant into a thin mouse, and the thin mouse gets fat. And then the same thing, you take the thin twin, you do a fecal transplant into a fat mouse, and it gets thin. So the gut microbiome, they release these kind of appetite suppressors, GPL1, PYY, and leptin, that actually decrease your appetite And they also kind of downgrade your ghrelin, which makes you like more hungry. So it's really amazing. I think that's one of the reasons why, if you look at the major studies, the Oxford EPIC study, the HS2 study, vegans were the only group that had BMIs under 25. Vegetarians were like about, I think it was like 25.6. Omnivores were about 28.8. And I think one of the reasons is probably because of the fiber. And most people are not getting nearly enough fiber. There was an NHANES study done about 10 years ago. Men from 30 to 50, 0% get 30 grams of fiber. And with women, it was 3%. I mean, that's really pretty pathetic. And I think 30 grams of fiber is really not high. I probably eat 70 to 100 grams of fiber every day. I mean, consistently. And most people aren't getting that at all, especially these people that are eating keto, animal-based products, carnivore diets. They're not getting really any fiber at all. In fact, there was a really amazing study done in 2014 in Nature, and they basically took two groups. They fed one a totally carnivore diet and the other one a whole food plant-based diet. And they measured their microbiome at the very beginning. And then every day they would analyze their microbiome for 5 days. And what they found was even the first day, there was already a significant change going on in the microbiome. In the people that were eating plant-based, the Prevotella good bacteria were going up, the bad Bacteroides bacteria were going down. And the people that were eating animal-based products, the Bacteroides was going up and the Prevotella was going down. And then at the end of 5 days, it was much more dramatic. And also I don't know if you're familiar with the American Gut Study, Robert Knight, he's one of the premier microbiome researchers. What he found, and he has a study going on where you send in your stool. I think he charges $100 for that. They do a extensive questionnaire to find out what you're eating, how you're exercising and sleeping and so forth. And what they do is they analyze your microbiome. And what they found was when they compared people that ate 30 different plant foods in a week compared to people that just ate 10 different types of plant foods per week, the people that ate 30 type had a much more flourishing microbiota. It was more diverse. They had more of the good Prevotella bacteria compared to the ones that ate 10. My wife and I, we try to get 40 per week. Herbs and spices are kind of included in that. But I do think the greater the diversity, the greater the gut microbiome, the greater your immune function is going to be. You're going to be in much better brain health situation because of all of the serotonin, all these neurotransmitters and dopamine. So I really think that the microbiome is so important. And one thing I just read recently that kind of blew my mind, I never even thought of this, but all the different functions that our bodies do, our cells really don't have the energy to do all that. So these 37 trillion bacteria down there, I mean, they're basically doing a lot of these different functions that they're using their own energy source there. So our cells really don't have to do a lot of that work. It's just really fascinating. In fact, there's a really good book for your viewers. It's called Fiber Fueled by Dr. Will Bolskowitz. I mean, it's a New York bestseller. It is an incredible book. He has an Instagram site. I think it's called Real Gut Health MD. But it's really well written. It's he's kind of does it in a humorous way, but he has fact after fact that are mind blowing in there. I mean, it really is a fascinating book, and he does promote more of a whole food plant based diet, and so that's kind of the last precept is get that fiber intake up to at least 30 grams per day, preferably 60 grams per day. That's what I would strongly recommend. But that does have to be done slowly. One thing you can't do with patients is just say, okay, start eating whole food plant-based like I did, because some people can't handle it because their gut bacteria really needs to make a major adjustment. So I usually tell people, hey, first week, why don't you do, steel cut oats with some berries, soy milk, and maybe try, just doing breakfast for a week or two. And then maybe the week after that, maybe do a couple lunches, learn recipes. I give all of my patients probably about 12 different really awesome cookbooks, websites that they can kind of learn different recipes and so forth. And then eventually, if you can get up to, anywhere from 85 to 95%, plant-based, that's fine with me. I don't have a problem with people eating meat. But I really do think they should try to keep their meat intake probably to about 15%, kind of the way the blue zone areas do, because they have a proven record. Those cultures been around forever. And sometimes people say, well, they're different cultures. Loma Linda is right in the middle of California. So, and in Loma Linda, they're basically where the Seventh-day Adventists eat. They're vegetarians. Women live about 10 years longer than their American counterparts, and men live about 14 years longer than their American counterparts. So, so eating a more plant-based diet definitely has extremely positive effects on longevity and health span.
When you look at it, when you take a step back and you look at cancer, of course, we should be approaching it a much more holistic way. And that's the kind of, gist of what you're saying here for all of this. Is that between diet, supplements, exercise, stress, sleep, the microbiome, these are things that are often overlooked, unfortunately, within the field of oncology. And I think it's just a little bit short-sighted to say we don't need to look at that and simply stick to the drugs. So I really appreciate even bringing this stuff up in a field that really kind of overlooks it. Now, unfortunately, we got to wrap this up.
Yeah.
Where can people learn more? Where can they read the book, Beat Back Cancer Naturally?
Well, it's on Amazon. You can get it hardback, paperback. It's an Audible and also Kindle. So you can get it there. You can also get it on my website. People get it on my website. I do give them a signed copy. It's about the same cost as if you get it on Amazon. And then if they want to get a virtual consultation, if they go under shopping, I have 1 or 2 hour virtual consults. They have 24/7 access to me if they want that, which I do think most of the patients do because I do think it's very beneficial. And then I have lab testing. I do it through Quest, which there's Quest just about everywhere, where I check 70 plus biomarkers. I check all their amino acids, their vitamins, heavy metals. I check C-reactive protein, omega-6 to omega-3 level, IGF-1, hemoglobin A1C, lipid profile. I really look at all that. So basically, I give them a diagnosis. They go to Quest. I write them up a lab sheet. The insurance covers. I do charge $150 just to analyze it. I write a letter. I do kind of a follow-up conversation with them. And then I have other testing through like doctor's data where it's done with stool. They basically send you the kit. You send it back to doctor's data and they do a really amazing microbiome analysis. I mean, they give you like a diversity score, pathogenic score. So I think that's a really good test. And then I also use Great Plains. There's a lot of toxicity screens that they have that I use, and all that's done through either urine, blood spot, or hair. So all that is done virtually. And then if I need places like your place, if somebody needs ozone or something like that, then I refer them out. Like I just referred someone over to David Minkoff's place over in, she lived in St. Augustine. So I sent her over there for ozone therapy. And then I talked to her a little bit she's like in a metastatic situation, hyperthermia treatment. Cleveland Clinic is offering that up there. So when you get to that point, you need to pull out all the stops. I mean, you need to do nutrition, conventional. I mean, you need to do everything you need to do to get yourself into a position of good health.
And what was that website?
Natural Insights, INSIGHTS, intocancer.com.
Awesome. We'll put that up as well in the show notes. Dr. Brandy, thank you so much for everything, for sharing this, for switching out of the anti-aging field into the cancer field because of your own journey and helping so many more now. Thank you.
Hey, it's been a pleasure. Anything I can do to help people going through this struggle, because it is a very formidable disease. It's scary. Like this last patient I just talked to with ovarian cancer, she just found out she had it in her liver and lungs. And she said, "Doctor, I'm scared." And, it's scary. And I said, "Listen, I'm going to be with you through this journey." I text her every day. "How's it going? What's going on?" But, so that's really, because I know I'm a patient. I know what it's like. And to have a doctor to be with you through the journey, you just can't put a price on that. My doctor, I talk to him like once every 4 months. I'm with these people day in and day out. So it really, I just know as a patient what that means. So,
yeah. Well, thank you for that. And as you heard, cancer is one of the most pervasive illnesses on the planet, and most patients are panic stricken when diagnosed. Hopefully, Dr. Brandy's story offers hope of a clear path for those struggling to find solutions. Until next time, continue writing your own healing story.